Hello and welcome. In this video we're going to be unboxing a 3D depth data camera. In this case it's going to be the Intel RealSense 415. I'll explain why I chose the 415. We'll have a look at it in operation and essentially my grand plans for it. So without further ado, let's unbox this. So I went with the Intel RealSense because price largely. I really wanted the Azure Connect. But it's more expensive and at the moment they're out of stock, and because I live in the UK I can't actually find anywhere to supply it. So if anybody actually knows where I can find one, message me because I'd really like to get one. But anyway, for now I've got the 415. So Intel make a variety of these sensors. These are aimed largely for AI and robotics, but they capture RGB data and depth data, which is the most important for me. Now I went for the 415 because it's cheaper. Really, that's one reason. Two, the 415 has a shorter range than the others, I believe. That therefore means that, because for myself, for my practical use, I don't actually want the sensor to be capturing a room. I just want it to capture a subject. So having it closer to the subject and the subject less than a meter away from it is the ideal situation. And this just ticks all the boxes. The 415 over the 435 has a few advantages and disadvantages. I would have gone for the 435 or the 435i, but the 435 and the 435i have a higher range, but that therefore means that the spread of the laser, the way the little dots, the sensors, would actually result in a lower quality for the purposes I need it for. It's better for tracking, but I'm not tracking. So 415 does the job for me. So what do I get in it? Well, we have this nice little box that for some reason the back is upside down. That's not me. This was delivered this way with a sticker on, so who knows. Let's see the information on the back first. So it's an Intel RealSense Vision Processor D4, up to 120 by 720 depth resolution. It's weird to think of depth as a resolution, but yeah, it's a resolution. 1920 by 1080 RGB, so that's our color values. That's the texture we're going to be applying over the top of that. A diagonal field of view of 70 degrees. Fine. Means you're not going to capture huge gamut up and down. You're not going to capture huge gamut on the sides. For me, again, that's fine. Dual rolling shutter sensors up to 90 frames per second. So 90 frames a second for depth. That's, again, fine for the person I'm using it for. Range between 0.3 to over 10 meters, depending on lighting conditions. Now, I have already tried this, admittedly. I've actually already unboxed this and made this video once. I'm just remaking this unboxing, really. What I mean by that is the range means I can get about this far. Once I start getting too close, it actually starts to occlude and lose me. Oh, let the camera refocus for a second. There we go. And it's using an open source SDK. It uses a laser, it's a class 1 laser, so just bear that in mind. And if we open the box, we have this little sensor here, and there it is. This did have a little protective cover on the sleeve, like a sticker. I removed that already because, like I said, I've already used this. And we have two IR, oh, it looks like I'm swearing, I'm not, sorry about that. We have these two, very hard to gauge, two little IR sensors, and then one is an RGB capture. And the laser is right here. So this is what outputs our laser. So again, if you're used to things like IR sensors or IR proximity sensors, for example, things in the light field technology that is apparent in Apple devices like the iPhone X and the new iPad Pros, you can capture that information, capture facial details. It allows the programs to be able to recognize whether it's a person, whether the face recognizes its database, hence why these are typically used in AI and robotics. I'm using it for its most basic of purposes, really. And that's largely it. At the bottom we have a little thread, so we'll get through that in a second. And it has a little cap here at the back. It's all made of metal, so it's really strong. Oh, there we go. Got a little metal cap that slides off, and a USB-C port, so that is what we're going to connect to our computer with. Now this is USB-C to USB 3.0. It works on Windows and Linux, but not Mac. You may be able to get it to work on Mac, but it doesn't support Mac. Again, I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Let's grab the box out. Ooh, careful not to destroy everything, because although it'd be a shame if I broke this very expensive sensor, which actually wasn't that expensive because I got this on discount because I had vouchers. So, well, I got this from Amazon anyway. If you're really interested, I'll put a link down below if you really want to buy one. So in the box, we also comes with this little tripod. Pretty cheap, pretty standard, solid, firm enough, I suppose. Not really going to use it. It's nice to have, I suppose, if you're, again, depending on what your setup is. These kind of things very often you can get from like Poundland and cheapo discount shops, so it's fine. And then obviously we have the cable. So that's our USB-C that goes into the camera, and then we have a 3.0 USB that goes into our computer. The cable length isn't amazing, so you would actually want a bit longer cable, as long as you keep to the 3.0. It might be 3.1. I'm pretty sure it's 3.0 cable length to USB. That should be fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hook this up. I've already downloaded the Getting Started software, so it actually comes with a little instruction guide. There's a little thing here that goes you how to get all the stuff, etc. But basically, I've already downloaded the software. It's a GitHub repository that changes. It's because it's open source. Things will, it's open to interpretation. So what we're going to look at is the depth viewer. So that's the included software that you can download that basically allows us to see what the RealSense is doing. That's the software provided by Intel. And then we're going to look at how we can capture our 3D data as a video. Now, the video capture software I'll be using called Depthkit, I will be using an evaluation version, just a little early heads up on that. That's because we do have to pay a license for it if we want to use this for unlimited or, to its full capacity. But the reason I wanted depth sensor, just as a kind of overarching theme, you may notice that in a previous video I actually bought the Looking Glass Portrait, a holographic screen. That is to be used in combination with this, basically, is my plan. A few years ago, I built this concept of a virtual augmented self. The idea of having people of different languages speaking to each other in their native tongue, augmented and displayed in front of its 3D models, to have these little 3D models talking to each other. And this was in collaboration with a co-worker of mine and some students over in Latvia. And it was amazing. It was primitive because it was built in a very short time, but the concept just never really left my mind, and it's something I've always wanted to kind of revisit but evolve. I wanted to get to a point where we didn't have to have people holding their phones up, pointing at things, or wearing VR goggles. So I've been looking at holographic displays. So the idea of having a face or a person captured, 3D data capture, I could use that. I could have done that with the Kinect, but I wanted to actually have it moving, and the Kinect isn't supported as much nowadays as for this, and it's better to have one of these. Really, it's a little bit cheaper in the long run for me. So I wanted to rebuild that concept, but using a holographic screen and depth data video on that screen to have a conversation between a real person and a virtually captured person, combining it with potentially things like leap motion sensor. And again, it's a part of a greater art installation that I'm hoping to build, and I'm hoping to guide you on that journey and show you my progress on that as we go through. It may never come to anything, just bear that in mind. But anyway, I'm just rabbiting on now. Let's actually look at the software and look what the sensor can do. Okay, so we have installed the RealSense viewer. This is from the GitHub website for the Intel RealSense Getting Started, and plugged it in using the USB 3.0 to the USB-C cable. And luckily for me, it's already picked up the source. We can currently see nothing in the preview window, but if I enable the stereo module, hello, we can start to see the depth data. So in this case, the kind of further away something is, the redder it gets, the closer it gets. If I get too close, it starts to go basically black, which means it can't see it. So the range on this, as you can see, is about ideally around where I am here, where I'm in the kind of blue-green area. Let's just check the box to make sure I'm correct with the distances. So yeah, range between 0.3 meters to 10 meters depending on lighting conditions. So I'm just going to also enable the RGB camera. There we go. So you can see where it's struggling to see is basically where there's shadow. So the fact that I'm occluding the objects behind me means it can't see those objects. So it's not the ideal situation. Ideally, I'd like to have this probably mounted a bit more evenly, like here. I'm not worrying about losing the background because I'm only really focusing on capturing the subject. So in this case, it'd be the speaker. We can do things like measure distance between these points. Just to show you that this is 3D data, I should be able to rotate around. There we go. So if I hold Alt, you can see it's picking up the 3D data. You can see obviously where it's not picking up, it's not capturing my entire, full 360. It's only capturing from the 70-degree dimension it can see. But it is 3D. My nose does stick out. It can pick up that depth. It's great in that. I can also adjust the values in the viewer, so I can increase the exposure. Ooh, that's going to have some frame rate issues, as you can already tell. Can increase the laser power, so how much kind of energy has been exerted by the laser, the sensor. Also the temperature that's been picked up by it. So again, if it gets too hot, it would fail. And just the depth unit, so that's how basically how much the measurements are in the scale, because again 3D depth measurements are kind of subjective. We can obviously scale things up and down once it's in the 3D space. Go back to advanced controls. We can adjust the depth, so we can adjust the thresholds. I'm not going to play about this too much. Just color controls, color correction. Can adjust the depth visualization, so let's just turn off the RGB camera for a second. So I can either have it's kind of fixed where everything is either blue or orange or red. We don't have this kind of dynamic shift between the color palettes. We can also change the color scheme, so by default it's set to jet. Typically when we were talking about depth, we quite often will work in either black to white or white to black, typically white to black. So whatever is white is what is kind of being captured, and the darker something is, the more black it is, the less it's going to be picked up in terms of depth. This is what we normally do when we're doing like texturing or creating like bump maps, for example. Can also adjust the distances, so what is the maximum minimum distances for the depth visualization to sort of pick up on. Can go to bio, let's look at bioweapon. So as you can see, we can change all the colours there. I'm going to keep it at white to black because that's actually what I'm more familiar with personally. We have post-processing, so this is where we can apply effects, like we can turn on or disable HDR, we can adjust whether the hole filling is on or off. So by default it's off. If I turn it on, it tries to fill in some of those gaps that you can see here. I've got to remember everything's slightly reversed for me. If I go back to the RGB camera and just turn it back on. Now this is only a 720p camera. So I can't capture sort of high 1080p 4K resolutions with this. I wouldn't want to. This is not for that kind of thing. This is literally for capturing depth data. That's why it's typically used for AI systems and robotics more, these kind of things are. But I can adjust things like the color values, obviously, still. Let's just set that back to 0. If it lets me, I can't seem to be able to manually type it in, so let's just drag it as close as I can. There we go. I have to click on a pen if I want to do it manually. Decimation filter, let's turn it on and see what that does. Oop, that's basically kind of softening things up. It's decimating my image, chopping it into chunks. Let's turn it back off. For now, we can also record this or change the texture in this, so we can change it to up here to change our depth or color, change our source or camera. whether we show point cloud information. So if I just turn the RGB off just again to make this a bit more obvious, and I'll bring myself closer, you should be able to see these little dots. Quite hard to make out, but you should be able to see, especially around the edges up here and over here, you can see these little dots. Okay, so that is the viewer. Like I said, if you've ever seen how the iPhone works, basically projecting lots of little dots all over the subject. I can export this 3D model from this software as a .ply, also including normals, which would also include the RGB values with the textual information I can apply as well. So I could put it into, I could take a still of that 3D model using this camera and import that into another program. What I'm more interested though in is recording 3D depth video. So to do that, I'm going to be using a piece of software called Depthkit. Now this isn't free. I'm going to be trying this on a free evaluation for the purposes of this video. I will be at a later date actually paying for the software and getting the kind of full unlimited access, so I can actually remove the 5-second limit that it has with the demo. So I'm just going to close the camera and we'll be back in a second. Okay, we're back. I'm trying out the evaluation version of Depthkit. This is a piece of software that basically allows us to record that depth information as video files or OBJ sequences. I'm going to be using this software and actually paying for it to actually unlock all the features. By default, some of the features are locked. So, for example, I can at the moment record up to 5 seconds, export those 5 seconds. It doesn't capture sound within the program. So if I want to record sound, I do actually have to take the .mp4 file, which is what it generates at the end, into another program, attach my sound, and then re-export it with the sound now embedded. So I would have to sort of synchronize that up and make sure the frame rates and the sound rates are the same, but that's not too hard, luckily. What you can see here is we have our color preview, we have our depth data preview down here, and then obviously on the bigger window we have them both together. We can also adjust our stream configuration. So even though it's a 720p resolution, the camera's actually picking up. Yeah, it is picking up at 720p as an active stereo depth resolution. I'm reading the back of the box here. It can actually capture up to 1080p in RGB. So the color values we can actually have as 1080p. The depth data is only at 720p. It's funny to speak about depth data as resolution because it's not quite as simple as that. And as we see here, I've just changed the value there, but it didn't seem to have detected the change. Let's see if that, oh, there we go. I've had to just click on the little rescan/reset button there. I should also be able to change it to 480p with a depth data of 720. So the depth data always stays at 720. It's just the color values that we can increase or decrease the resolution of. So let's go back up to 1080 because that's the best that we're going to get out of this. And again, because I'm going to be putting this onto a small holographic screen, onto the looking glass, I'm not after anything kind of huge. 4K would just be ridiculous file sizes for the purposes of all this. What I can do then is I can also adjust my preview range. So I can drag this little slider here and you can see we're getting this transparent grid appearing, this sort of checkerboard pattern. I say checkerboard, it's actually, in this case, striped lines to show transparency or what's not being picked up. And whatever is in colour is basically what's being picked up, and obviously the colours denote the closeness to the subject. Again, if I get too close, the scanner loses me, so I have to stay within that 0.3 meters to 10 meter range. So let's just pull that down a bit to, let's say, here. I'm going to just try and keep my chair in and have a bit of my monitoring. Oh, you can see a glass at the side. Well, my previous evening. So there we go, we have our capture there. And I can hit record. Boop, I'm not going to press record, I'll press record for now. So I can do my talking, I can present, I can go crazy like this. Because I've not got an active plan, I am limited, and you can see it's using up the hard drive space fairly quickly. So I'm just going to stop that recording now. I'm then going to go over to the edit window. And this will now take that video I've just captured and allow me to edit it. Now, you'll see I've got 2 takes here because I've already done a previous take in this project, so I'm just going to go to the new take I've just done. So I'm just going to double click on that. There we go. So what you can see here is we can see our colour preview, our depth preview in the video we had before. If I press play, we can see that depth video now playing. You can see obviously it's still missing some parts, some of the things are absent from the video. But luckily we do have some options to bring some of that information back. So in our edit window, we can go to refine. We can enable refinement. So this brings up a variety of options for us where we can do things like we can adjust our depth contribution. So how much our depth is kind of being collected, our fill amount, so we can actually start to bring and fill in some of the gaps that we had. So we had some, as you can see, if I bring this back down to 1, we're missing all this back end here. It tries to pick up the colours that are closest and fill them in, stretch them in to those gaps. It's not going to obviously pick up everything because again we reset and adjusted how much is actually being detected by the scanner. We can also refine our filter so we can start to pull things in a little bit around the edges alongside our sharpness. So if we start increasing our sharpness, we actually start to bring more information back. Colour contribution, so if we actually reduce our colour contribution, we're bringing back more of the RGB value. If I go to isolate, we can still adjust our segmentation. So if I just pull that depth data back, you see that all our depth data actually wasn't removed. We can still bring it back in the edit stage. Like so. A refinement mask, this is where we can use a video file with a depth data sort of mask, so the white and black essentially, to tell the video or the program what it is we want to keep, what everything that is white keep, everything that's black remove, or for example. And basically that cuts out what we are, but obviously the issue of that is if you're then moving outside of what the video mask permits, you would start to crop things off. We can also crop the video so we can pull in from the side. So if I don't want this stuff on that side, I can crop it in. Likewise with the other side, like so. And obviously top and bottom. And then lastly we have our export. So we have 4 export options. We have combined per pixel video. This generates a MP4 video, and let me just see if I can show you this quickly. So if I just go to my depth folder for a second. Okay, so you can see here this is an earlier project I was just playing about with, but what the per pixel export does, it creates this video file here where we have our depth data, RGB, basically our color values here, and then we have our depth data mask here. So this is what is actually the software is picking up to tell us what is 3D, what isn't, what's close to camera, what isn't close to camera, etc. So that is our per pixel video. We will then also have our combined per pixel image sequence. So if I just go back to this folder here, we can actually export those frames as images that we can then import into a video program and stitch them back into a video, or take individual frames and use them in other programs to use our depth data. We also have our OBJ sequence. This generates 3D models from our RGB values and depth data as individual frames. This, obviously, you can imagine the longer your video is, can start to get huge, but we can take individual frames of that depth data and use those 3D models that we can then manipulate in something like Blender or 3ds Max. And OBJ backplate is a similar thing, except we're using it for kind of a background capture of our scene that we can then use in our Blender project or 3D project. So it's basically the inverse of our our OBJ sequence, essentially. And that's basically it at the moment. If we just go to preferences and just see what options are there, we can increase the amount of memory that's allocated to it. We can obviously view, record, we have a help information there, and create a new project to set records, situations, etc. There isn't a lot to it. Depthkit is about $40 a month on its kind of lowest end. So as you can imagine, I'm going to be pursuing this at a point when I'm ready to kind of deploy the project or close to capturing the subjects. But it's a fantastic little piece of kit just to capture that video depth data that, again, we could put into a program, and I'm going to be using this for the looking glass portrait, just to capture that kind of information that a static 2D video would miss. Now, obviously, there's still things to refine, and again, if you depending on what sensor you're using, depending on how accurate the data is you capture. Obviously, the more expensive sensors, such as the Zero Connect, do a better job. But again, the Intel RealSense 415, which is what I'm using for this video, does a great job. I only spent around £90 for it in total. Again, because I had gift cards and vouchers and stuff I needed to use up, so I didn't pay the full price for it. But you can pick these up fairly cheap. The 435, 435i are the same, they just have a greater range, but it means the subject can't get as close. And for me, getting the subject as close as possible with the amount of information and detail I want from that subject being close was more important than capturing a larger space. Okay, so hopefully now that kind of gives you a insight into the Intel RealSense, why I bought it, the kind of advantages, disadvantages of it in operation. Like I said, it's not the only sensor. There are a variety of other 3D depth capturing sensors out there. The Azure Connect being the one, like really top one I really want to get from consumer grade. RealSense is to do a variety of models. They have different ranges for different purposes. 415 is the cheaper one, and well, I've got it, does what I need it to do. It's good for close range, it's fine. You can also use the original Xbox Connect and the Xbox Connect V2, but because of the support for those is more problemsome, because Microsoft have kind of dropped support for them in many ways. I don't quite have the faith to suggest those for this sort of thing, and a lot of the software actually, Depthkit, I believe can work with the Connect V2, but you're better off having a dedicated depth sensor or camera really for the long term. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I'm sorry this is an unusual type of video, I don't normally record like this way, but I just thought it's quicker, it's more impersonal. This literally came to my house today at the time of making this video, and I just wanted to see you in operation and give you kind of insight into these technologies that you may be aware of but not necessarily thought about in using them in novel ways. Thank you for watching. Like, comment and subscribe.